Friends, welcome to my channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It's not difficult for you, but it's nice for me, and we're starting. Late Monday afternoon, I sat on the toilet with my pants down and listened to them laughing at me. They found it all funny, especially the part where it said I had no idea. How could a guy not know that his wife was cheating on him and do it right under his nose? Colleen Wilson, the one who said he used my wife, was telling Ben Kramer, his friend, how he seduced her at a party last week. It was a party that I was called from during the celebration to investigate the site of a break-in at a local art gallery. I was only gone for about 2 hours, but I returned before the end of the evening. I found my wife at a table with 3 other people, one of whom was Colleen Wilson. The other couple sitting there were his boss and his wife. My name is Brian Sexton, and I am an insurance detective for a worldwide insurance company that deals exclusively with wealthy clients. You probably don't know my name because we serve a very exclusive clientele. I joined them right after graduating from college and have been working with them for a little over 15 years now. I am 37 years old and in the prime of my life. My job is to investigate the circumstances of incidents in which major claims may be made. It's a routine for the most part, but sometimes it gets pretty exciting. I mostly investigate thefts and robberies, but sometimes car crashes if more than 1 or 2 of our cars are involved. I'm very good at it, and I have a high reputation in my industry. I was often loaned to other companies, but for a lot of money. I've traveled a lot, but I've never stayed long. If a lengthy investigation was required, I had people who stayed in place and did all the necessary work. I've been married to Allison for 14 years now, and we have 2 wonderful children, 10-year-old Regina and 8-year-old Christina. Allison is a year older than me and works for the same company as a receptionist for Bill Quinn, the president of the company. We met and got married before she joined the company, but when she lost her job, I wanted her to try working for my company. We had to get permission from the HR department because the close relationship between the employees was contrary to company policy, but because I was a valuable employee, they agreed to hire her. Fortunately, Bill Quinn was looking for a new secretary, and Allison worked as a personal assistant for a major corporate figure for more than 5 years. He interviewed her and liked her immediately. She was hired as his personal secretary. The 2 men I mentioned earlier, Colleen Wilson and Ben Kramer, were insurance specialists who drafted insurance policies for large companies or individuals with very expensive assets. They were my acquaintances, not my friends. Both worked for Jerry Scoggins, a nice guy who was a good friend of mine. I reported directly to Bill Quinn and worked independently in most cases, but sometimes I took interesting assignments from Jerry. The conversation I overheard took place just a week after the party. I went to the toilet to relieve myself and sat there for a while, covered in sweat and cramps. I had some scallops for lunch this afternoon, and I think they were a little spoiled. While I was cursing fate, Colleen and Ben came in. They didn't seem to pay attention to the closed door of the booth and started discussing the party. That's when Colin started bragging to Ben about his latest conquest. I listened to this story with increasing nausea in my stomach, which had nothing to do with cramps and sweating due to rotten food. How did you end up in her underwear? I didn't think she was that kind of woman. Come on, tell me, since I wasn't there myself. We danced a couple of dances, and she was quite friendly, but Brian was there, and she just smiled when I offered to come into my office. She said Brian wouldn't be too happy if she did. And then what? What did you do? Well, I persuaded her to have a drink with me at the bar while Brian was dancing with his secretary Judy. I asked the bartender to pour me a double shot, and I replaced mine with hers while she was talking to someone else. It was the simplest thing. I just wanted to get her a little drunk so I could seduce her on the dance floor. You know, take what you could. Yes, but Brian was still there. So what could you really do? Hey, wait a minute. You didn't arrange for his departure, did you? Hell, no. It was just dumb luck. We were doing a quick dance when he came up to her and said he needed to leave for a while. She wanted him to take her home first, but he told her to stay and have fun, as he was sure he would be able to return very soon. She didn't really like the idea, but she stayed. She sat with me, Jerry, and his wife. What happened next? Go to the most interesting part. Well, Brian left, and I brought her another drink. I asked Joe to make a double portion again, and she never noticed the difference. I foresee what will happen after that. You guessed right. One more serving and she felt dizzy. I suggested that she go out for some fresh air, and she readily agreed. I took her to my car, and we got in the back seat. I can't believe Allison would do that. She never looked like the kind of person who cheats on her husband or gives in to people like you. Are you sure this really happened? I'm not lying to you. I have a date with her next Saturday, when she usually goes to do her hair. She said she would meet me and asked me to get a room at a motel. I'm going to use it all day. You'll see. Well, I envy you, man. Allison is quite a thing. I've always wondered what Brian did to deserve her. Maybe you can set me up when you get tired of her. Maybe. We'll see. In the meantime, forget about this conversation. I don't want anything to ruin everything. Okay, no problem. They both came out of the toilet while I was sitting there trying to keep my stomach from spilling out through my mouth. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. Could it really be true? I started to remember that night. It was almost 11 p.m. when I returned to the party, and Allison was sitting with Colleen, Julie, and Jerry Scoggins. When I sat down with her, Allison didn't look drunk, and she and Julie were talking about the kids. Colin talked to me, but didn't stay more than a few minutes before leaving. I noticed that Allison had said something to him, but I didn't pay attention to it. The only thing that was weird that night was that Allison wanted to make love when we got home. There was nothing strange about it, but she usually didn't want to do it this late. She was especially excited that evening. Feeling guilty? Remorse? Maybe. It's been a week since the party, and I haven't noticed any changes in Allison's behavior. She never once mentioned that I wasn't at the party or what she did when I wasn't there. I asked her, and she said she danced a little with Colin and Jerry, but mostly just watched. He and Julie talked about the school and the play the children were in, but she said that was probably all. She said she would have preferred to come home when I left. I left this topic and decided to observe it more closely. Listen, baby, do you have any plans for Saturday? I was going to play golf if you don't mind. I watched the reaction on her face. This Saturday, I do my hair right after lunch. It will take me at least an hour or an hour and a half. Where are you going to play golf? So she was going to get her hair done. How could Colin know if she hadn't told him? I didn't even know about it. It seemed to me that it was all too real. I think it's the country club. I might find out if Ben Kramer can join me. I have no idea. I know Jerry plays, but I don't know Ben or his wife very well, so I really don't know. Me too. What about Colin Wilson? You talked to him at the party, didn't you? Maybe he can go. Allison turned and gave me a strange look. She paused before answering. Why do you want to go with him? He is, forgive the expression, an asshole. I had to dance with him a couple of times at a party, but he just got to me. He's a real stickler. That was interesting. Was she trying to dissuade me from inviting him so they could meet? Or was she trying to convince me that she didn't like him? Anyway, it was very unusual for her to talk about someone else like that. I don't know much about him, but he's a friend of Ben's, and they seem to share everything. Maybe this is a bad idea. I'll just call Phil and Charlie. They always want me to join them. That sounds much better. Stay away from Colin. He's a bad partner. Okay, he's been crossed off my list. So you don't mind my golf game? I don't mind, because I won't be home anyway. Why don't we have dinner later at the Cypress Inn? I'll have beautiful hair, and you can relax after playing golf. You can take me somewhere and show me around. I can take Chrissy and Gina to my parents. I agreed, and we agreed to meet at home on Saturday afternoon at 5:30 p.m. to prepare. If I'm careful, I can get all the information I need to divorce her on the same day. It would be great to present this to her over dinner at one of the most beautiful places in the city. The next day, when I got to work, I went down to the back room to get some of what I needed to conduct an investigation against my wife and her lover. I decided to take one of the company's vans with surveillance equipment. I left it in the parking lot of the company until Saturday morning, when I left for the golf. I bought 2 small transmitters to put in her purse and in the car, and one of the small GPS navigators that I could install in her car. This would allow me to determine exactly where she is at any moment. There was also a video link in the van, but I couldn't decide what to do with it. Since Colin said they were going to a motel, I didn't see a way to take pictures. Maybe I could attach a camera to her jacket, but only if I knew what she was going to wear. I would have tried, but I wasn't sure. If she goes anywhere, I can follow her with the GPS. A van with a surveillance system could connect to the signal, and I could track her location on a map in the van. It was programmed with local street maps in mind, so that I could determine the exact address with an accuracy of 30 meters. The sound transmitters picked up any voices, and I could record them in the van. All of this could be done automatically, so I didn't even have to be in the van. All I had to do was park it a kilometer away from where she was. Great. I planned to spend the rest of the week just watching. I was very good at it, because that's what I did for a living. I was watching Ben and Colin, but I didn't see anything unusual. I usually visited my loving wife at least once a day, but now I started coming in a little more often. I still didn't see anything that would make me suspicious, but I decided to try what I could find out from Ben. He was developing policies for a large industrial complex, and I usually spent some time just inspecting the facility and making contingency plans in case of a possible disaster. This was called risk analysis and was part of any underwriting process. That Tuesday, I stopped at his workplace, just across from Colin's office. He was working on his project there. Hi, Ben. Today I would like to take a look at the plan of the Baxter's plant. Do you have some time to show me around? He looked up absently until he understood what I was talking about, and then just shrugged. Of course, I can go at any time. I still need to go back there to take some pictures. When do you want to go? How about an hour or so? Great. I'll pick you up on the way. After saying a few more words, I went out and looked back as I was turning the corner, just in time to see Ben and Colin grinning. They looked at me when I was out of sight. Is it interesting? Assholes. I decided that I would make Ben pay. He wasn't guilty of anything other than colluding with Colin and making rude remarks about my wife, but he was aware of the plan and decided to see how Colin cuckolded me, so in my opinion, he was no less guilty. Ben pulled in about an hour later, as planned, and we drove off in my truck. I installed one of the small transmitters on the console of my truck. He could intercept any conversation in or near the truck. I wanted to tape what I was going to say to Ben. Some things concerned only him and me. When we pulled out of the parking lot and went on a 25-minute drive to Baxter's, I started talking. Tell me, Ben, did you enjoy the party last week? I couldn't go, Brian. I was on the road, so I missed all the fun. What kind of fun was that, Ben? How did Colin use my wife? Is this the fun you missed? Ben was stunned and didn't know what to say. He stuttered, fidgeted in his seat, and even reached for the door handle until he realized where he was. Finally, he slid down and looked at me. How did you know? All I know is what Colin told me. I don't even know if it's true. Do you think he would lie about something like that? Do you think he would have made that up? No, I don't think so. But how did you know? As far as I heard, you weren't even there. Didn't they call you for a couple of hours? That's when it happened. Colin told me that he got her drunk and then took her to his car. How do I know? It's none of your business. I just want to know what else Colin told you. Does he have any plans for the next meeting? This was done in order to see if I could trust what this asshole told me. He said they were going to do it on Saturday, when she was supposed to have her hair done. This time he was going to rent a room. That's all I know. Honestly, Brian. Well, I want to thank you for being a good friend and telling me about it, I said sarcastically. I know you wouldn't want to be a part of something like that. You were going to tell me anyway, weren't you? Yes, of course. I like you and Allison. I wouldn't want something like that to happen to you. Colleen is a real jerk. I'm sorry you had to make me confess. I feel like a real ass. A hypocritical piece of shit. What did he say there? Oh, yes, maybe he could have her when Colleen was done with her. With that, I reached for the console and turned off the recorder. It was something I wanted to put off for later. What I wanted to say now was off the record. It's not a problem, Ben. As long as you do what I tell you, you'll be fine. If you lie to me, it will hurt you very much. Is that clear? Ben just shook his head in the affirmative. He understood what was going on. One more thing, Ben. None of our conversations will go to Colin. He shouldn't know what I know, and you're not going to tell him. If I find out that you told him something, I'll beat the shit out of you first, and then I'll make sure that you're fired and that everyone knows that you can't be trusted. Do you understand me? You know I have ways to eavesdrop on you and Colin, so I'll find out if you talk. I won't tell Colin anything. I won't even talk to him if you want. No. Do what you always do and let him talk. That's all you have to do. It's not a problem if you agree with him. Now I know the truth. Just remember what I said, and you'll be fine. After that, we hardly spoke and spent the next 2 hours on the construction site in complete silence. He was doing his job, and I was doing mine. I had what I needed, and Ben was going down too. He just didn't need to know about it right now. That week was one of the longest in my life. I watched my wife tirelessly, but she didn't do anything unusual. It was Wednesday evening, and the children went to the school dances for the youngest, which were supposed to end at about 21:30. I was sitting in the living room just watching TV when Allison came in and sat on my lap. She put her arms around my neck and nuzzled my ear. "We have about 2 hours before I go to pick up the kids. Do you want to make love?" Although I was a little confused and angry about what was happening, I was still a man and a man. "Take me upstairs to your bed right now. I want you inside me, and I want it now. Come here, big boy. I want to see what I can do. I want to see it in person." For a while, we just lay in each other's arms, not feeling the need to say anything or change our mood. It was the strongest love. For a while, I forgot about the doubts and the fear that everything might end for us. I wanted to forget and believe that it was all a lie. But this was not to be. "It was very nice, my husband. I think we need to do this more often, don't we? I don't think we've been getting along for a while. Let's not let this happen again." "Okay, good. I will definitely work on it. What time is it, and do we have time to take a quick shower?" "It's already after 2100 hours, and I need to pick up the children. We can discuss this later if you want, or wait until our date on Saturday night. I can send the kids to my mom's for the night. How about this?" "Agreed. Is there anything else that could hurt on Saturday?" "Like what?" "You have golf, and I have an appointment with the hairdresser. Then, my love, we go to dinner, and after that I'm yours, and you can do whatever you want with me. And please do a lot of things for me. Have you had a better offer lately?" "Never." "All right, let's do it." Allison dressed quickly and went to the children. I lay there for a while, thinking about what had just happened. While she was gone, I checked the transmitters and made sure they were working fine. On Friday evening, I installed them in her car and purse. I was completely ready, except for one more meeting with Ben Kramer. I needed to find out which motel Colin had booked a room at. Ben will figure it out for me, or I'll do something he won't like. The next morning, I called Ben and asked him to meet me in the cafeteria on the 3rd floor. He agreed without comment, and I was sitting at one of the tables when he came in. He joined me without saying anything, and I quickly got down to business. "Ben, my friend, I need you to find out from Colin where he plans to take Allison on Saturday. I need the name of the motel and where it is located. All you have to do is take him to a secluded place and ask. Tell him that you think he's cheating on you, and that if he tells you where he's taking her, you'll believe him." I smiled at Ben, who was trying to figure out how to fulfill my request. He was afraid that I would do something if he refused. He eventually agreed, but asked how I would know if I didn't tell him where they were supposed to meet. I told him not to worry about it. I had ways. With that, he left, but not before I hugged him and tucked one of the transmitters into the collar of his jacket, reminding him of our agreement. He was so scared of me that he didn't feel anything. It was almost invisible, taped together, and he wouldn't have noticed it. I went back to my office and turned on the radio. He buzzed and informed me that Ben had returned to his desk and was talking to Colin. I heard him ask Colin to meet him in the copy room in 10 minutes. Colin agreed, and nothing else, until Ben got up to meet with Colin. I made myself comfortable to listen. "How are you, buddy? Do you have problems with insurance?" "I'm the best you know." "That's bullshit, Colleen. I was with Brian at the construction site yesterday, and he doesn't seem to have any problems at home. I asked him if he was okay, and he said something about how it couldn't be better. I think you told me something about his wife." "Listen, man, only the truth. I wouldn't lie about something like that. Why don't you believe me? Where are you taking her on Saturday?" "You said a motel." "Which motel?" "Maybe if you show me the room receipt or something, I'll believe you. Otherwise, I think you're kidding me." "Yes? I've already booked a room at the Skyview Motel on Statler Street for Saturday night. I can stop by at 2 p.m., and she'll be there at 2:15 p.m. How do you like this option? You can call Skyview and check my name for the reservation. Does it suit you? Do you want to use my mobile phone?" "Okay, I think that's enough. I really envy you, Colin. Allison is really something. I hope you know that she and Brian have a good marriage that you're trying to ruin. You'd better be careful and think it over carefully. It's not my problem. If she agrees, then so do I. Anyway, how good can a marriage be if she's willing to use me?" That was all that was worth hearing. So I turned off the receiver and just let him do the rest. Now I was almost ready to believe in everything. I really hoped that Colin would step back and admit that he made it all up, but now he's confirmed the number and just waited. At least I had the address, so I could connect it to the equipment in the van and do the rest automatically. Maybe I could just park the van there on Friday night, turn on the equipment on Saturday around noon and forget about everything. Everything else would be done automatically, and I wouldn't need to be anywhere nearby. I didn't want to see or hear my wife rip out my heart and throw it down the toilet. Now I was lost. I could only go all the way and try to get what I needed to get back at her, Colleen and Ben. The first thing I did was call the motel and make sure that Colin was registered. He was right. Now all I had to do was wait for Friday night. But then I had an idea. What if I could take some pictures of them walking into a motel room? That same day, I decided to go to the motel and see what I could do. I went into the office of the Skyview Motel and waited for the employee. He was an unsightly character, and that was fine with me. Honesty was not what I was looking for right now. Hello, friend. I'm an investigator for an insurance company, and I need some information. I have an ID card and a search warrant. With that, I quickly showed him my badge and handed him a document that most people would have thought was a search warrant. It was a fake, but I figured he was just being fooled. The $100 I shoved at him didn't hurt either. Yes, of course, boy. What do you want to know? I asked him to confirm the reservation for Colin Wilson and asked if he already had a room number. He said no, and I asked if he could book him a room on the second floor overlooking Statler Street. He hesitated and hesitated until I slipped him another $50, and he finally gave me a room number where I could install a camera. I informed him about the van that would be parked in his parking lot, but he just shrugged, saying it wasn't a problem. I thanked him again for his help and handed him another $50 for his silence. He grinned maliciously and put the bills in his pocket. After he left, I decided that I could now get the video I wanted by pointing the camera through the front window of the van, which I would leave in front of their room. Now I was ready. Friday at work turned out to be quite difficult for me. I didn't know what to do with myself, so I went up to Bill Quinn's office under the pretext that I wanted to tell him about my visit to an art gallery that had been robbed. He didn't really need to know, but I wanted to see my wife. As I walked down the hallway, her face lit up when she saw me. She motioned me over to her desk, and I came over. I really liked the last few days. You started coming to me more often than before. I'm not complaining, but what's the matter? Is there something going on that I should know about? Nothing special. It's just nice to see you. That's all. Is Bill in? Me too. And yes, he's at home. Do you want me to call him? Yes, if possible. I need to talk to him about working at an art gallery. I went in and had a little chat with Bill. Bill was very young to be president, but I realized that some time ago he had already earned a reputation for himself. He founded this company, as well as most other companies, and ensured their operation. I knew that he owned a significant part of the company. He had a charming wife named Naomi, whom I met several times. She looked like a typical trophy wife, blonde, slender, damn beautiful and truly gorgeous. He and Allison were almost the same age and talked a lot, and Bill and I were pretty close. When I was there, I asked him directly what he thought of Colin Wilson. At his request, I often talked about the work of other employees, as he insisted that I take on more responsibility as a leader. Why do you want to know about Colin? Is there something going on that I should know about? I need you to tell me if any of my employees are causing trouble. This is all? Well, it looks like I have a really big problem with Colin. I don't really like him or Ben. I may have some additional information for you this weekend. If everything goes as I expect, I'd like to call you at home on Sunday, if you don't mind. Otherwise, I'll wait until Monday. We'll see. Until then, I'd rather you didn't tell anyone about this. Okay, no problem. I'll wait for you. You know, I trust your opinion on such matters. You've always been fair in your assessments, and I respect that. I would just like you to think about taking the position of vice president that I offered you. I still haven't told Allison about it at your request, but she needs to know about it. In fact, if you don't tell her soon, I will. I'm just waiting for the right moment to raise this issue. This means big changes for us, so I wanted to take the time to think about it carefully. I'll definitely let you know next week. How do you like it? That's great. So, are you finally going to consider this? I promise I will. I've been thinking about this a lot lately, so I need to make a decision as soon as possible for my reasons. I left his office, stopping to have a few words with Allison before going down to Ben. I stopped at his desk for a second and said loudly enough for Colin to hear me that I thought his assessment of Baxter's work had hit the mark. Then I gave him a thumbs up so he would know that I had heard his conversation with Colin. His eyes widened when I did, but he didn't say anything. He just nodded. I patted him on the back, taking out a small transmitter. As before, he felt nothing. I ended the day with no distractions and waited for Allison before heading home. I wanted to tell her that I need to leave the van for someone, and I'll catch a taxi to get back to my car, so I'll be a little late. She kissed me goodbye and left, heading home. I noticed Colleen standing in the doorway and watching her leave. He looked at me and turned to go back to the office. I parked the van, set the camera in the right position, and made sure that it recorded the room number that the clerk gave me. I locked her up and reminded the motel owner that I had to leave her there overnight and maybe tomorrow. I slipped him another $20 and thanked him for his understanding. He put the money in his pocket and gave me $5. After that, I headed home. Friday night at home was another surprise. Allison ordered pizza for the children and said she had arranged for them to stay with their grandmother tonight and tomorrow. I asked her what it was about, and she replied that she really enjoyed Wednesday night. She would like to continue it tonight. Did I have any problems? Not very. Well, Friday night went pretty much the same as Wednesday night, except that we did something new. Although I enjoyed it, I had an unpleasant feeling when I thought about where she could have learned it. But when I asked her about it later, she giggled, took a book out of her nightstand and showed me an article about making love after 35. I'll be damned if it didn't contain almost everything we've been doing the last 2 nights. I really enjoyed this evening. I tried to do everything she wanted me to do, and I pretty much succeeded. It took most of the evening, but so what? I promised myself that I would take some Viagra. We lay side by side, and I finally plucked up the courage to ask her where it all came from. Allison, I love what we're doing and I really want to please you, but I have to ask, where does this come from? Why now? If I didn't trust you so much, I'd think it was out of remorse. I'm sorry, honey. Naomi told me something last week that I can't repeat. I just keep thinking about us, about the girls, about our life together, and sometimes it makes me so happy that I just need to express myself. I chose this path because I wanted to show you how much you mean to me. I listened, and my heart fluttered with the realization that she was happy. But the next moment, I wondered how she could have an affair if it was true. Should I ask her? What if I make some noise? I'm glad you think so. Are you sure I'm making you happy enough? Are you happy with the way we make love? Or are you missing something, and that's why you're doing these new things? You can be honest and tell me about it. I like our lovemaking, and you've always satisfied me in every way. I have no reason to want more, but I just don't want us to get into a rut where we get so used to everything that it turns into a routine and boredom. Can't you see that? Don't you want me to always be like this? You don't have to worry about that. I love you and always will. I can't imagine doing anything that would destroy what we have together. That's good, because I wouldn't let you do that. You are mine now and forever. We spent the rest of the night in each other's arms, and that's how we woke up. I was pleasantly exhausted, but I wanted to take a shower with Allison. I woke her up and dragged her into the shower. She went reluctantly and with feigned irritation. She complained bitterly that she had been dragged out of a warm bed, but when I let her go, she did not leave. We turned on the water, and she quickly stood under the jets, turning and holding out her arms for me to join her. We lathered each other from head to toe and paid special attention to each other's most interesting places. After a few minutes, I got hard, and she did her best to keep me in that state. I arrived at the motel parking lot very early that morning and made sure everything was set up. I set all the timers to 1300 hours and made sure that the audio cassettes are set for 5-hour recording. The video was on DVD, and it would have taken at least 7 hours in compressed form. It would take all day. I started filming and locked the van. When these two lovers entered their love nest, they became the stars of my new film, and the first screening would have made a very strong impression on all participants. I drove back home to pick up my clubs and wish my beloved wife a good day. That day was terrible in every way. I was playing golf with 2 guys I met at the club, and based on my results, they must have decided that I was wasting my money on club membership. In the end, I bought beer for all of us because I lost the most. It was about 1700 hours when I went down to the van to make sure everything was in order. I looked around the room, but I didn't see any cars or any activity, so I assumed they had already left. To make sure, I quickly dialed my home phone number and Allison answered. I just told her I was on my way and hung up. Since the time of the meeting with Allison was already close, I drove home without reviewing any of the information I had collected. I really wanted to check it out before dinner, but then I thought about our planned evening. Why not enjoy what she had to offer, at least once more? After all, I really enjoyed making love to her, and even if she cheated on me, it shouldn't have ruined my evening. I thought about it, but I felt like I was starting to suffocate again. Why did she do this to me? I loved her more than I could have imagined, and I didn't know how I would go on without her. I knew that if I had the information I expected to see on the surveillance footage, I would have to file for divorce. I loved her, but I couldn't accept her behavior. What about the children? She was a good mother, and she should have gotten custody. It was the right thing to do. If she was cheating, then she must have had some reason that I didn't know about. She was a good person, but she did a bad thing. Okay, I could deal with that. She could have kept the children, and I would have paid alimony. These thoughts occupied me as I drove home to meet my wife. I wasn't sure I could make it through the evening, but I had to try. I couldn't stand up to her until I had proof. There was a small voice in the back of my mind that continued to deny all the information I had so far. He kept insisting that something was wrong. I ignored him. Facts are facts, and soon I will have all the necessary facts. Allison had already showered and dressed at home. She said she would put the finishing touches when it was time to pack up for the road. In the meantime, I quickly cleaned myself up, and we were able to leave just in time to make a reservation. My wife was a beauty, and she was always noticed when we entered the room. She was used to admiring glances from men and just ignored them, but I noticed, and it always made me proud of myself. Today it was a reminder of what could happen. Besides, she was smart and made a great dinner partner. We discussed all the issues that a husband and wife discuss when they have free time, and at dinner we drank wine, and she drank more than I did, since I was driving. It seemed to me that she was really flirting with me. My wife, with whom we have lived for 14 years, and the mother of my 2 girls flirted with me. It almost broke my heart to realize that she might have spent hours making love to another man that very day, and now she was flirting with her husband over dinner. When we were finishing the chocolate mousse dessert, which was preceded by a small sorbet, we looked at each other and smiled. We were both ready to spend the evening at home, in the bedroom. I signaled the waiter to bring the bill, and Allison went to the ladies' room. We got out, holding hands, and headed for the car. As I turned onto the main street, heading towards our house, Allison moved closer to me and rested her head on my shoulder. She raised her hand, took it off the steering wheel, and put it on her lap. Giving her a little push, I hugged her with one arm, as we used to do when we were young and fell in love for the first time. She sighed and relaxed. So we drove home. Quiet, but cozy. At home, Allison was walking around the house, making all the necessary preparations to put everyone to bed, and finally looked at me. Shall we go upstairs and pick up where we left off this morning? I think you owe me something, since you gave me an advance earlier. Remember? I remember. You go, and I'll follow you. We quickly climbed the stairs to the bedroom, and Allison stopped in front of the bed, reaching for my hand. I went up to her, and she took my hand and put it under her soft skirt to the warmth between her legs. To my surprise, she wasn't wearing any panties. She smiled at my surprise and whispered that they were in her purse. She laughed out loud when I looked at her. If you were a real romantic, you could have fun in the car, but I didn't want you to crash, so I left it for later. Do you like? I like it. Come to me and let me feel you better. With that, I unbuttoned the small side button and pulled the skirt down from her hips. Don't take it off. You look so beautiful standing here with nothing but pearls around your neck. You are incredibly beautiful. I could look at you all night long. This is something that only you can see. I belong to you completely, and I want you to do whatever you want with me. I want this to be the first night in the rest of our lives together. Are you sure? Is that what you want? I wouldn't do anything to hurt you or make you feel ashamed. You should know that. I completely trust you and give myself completely to you. I love you with all my heart. At that moment, I believed her and realized that no matter what I discovered the next day, I would never give up on her. I'll figure it out tomorrow, with tomorrow. I will love this woman with all my heart tonight. That night we did things that I had never done before. We made love in positions that I thought were impossible, and she did things to me that I didn't even think about. Sometimes she would laugh and quote the page number when I asked her about it. But it was a magical night. I know that I had at least 3 ejaculations, and she told me that she had 5 moments. We fell asleep in each other's arms and woke up late Sunday morning. She didn't want to get up, so I offered to encore one of our favorite poses that we had performed the night before. She quickly agreed, and we made love one more time before finally getting up. She had to pick up the girls on Sunday. I told her that I needed to go to the construction site urgently, check on the van, and that I would be home soon. She said she would probably stay with her mom for a while before coming back. That gave me time to get the tapes out of the van and see what was on them. I still had to check the tapes in her purse and car, but that could be done later. She left, and I went to the van. I took all the printout tapes without any problems and drove the van back to the factory. I called a taxi to pick me up. It took me back to my car, and I drove home. The first thing I did was look at the GPS printout. This told me that her car was indeed parked on Statler Street, where the motel was located, and it almost stopped my heart. I hoped against all odds, but obviously it wasn't meant to be. I didn't go into much detail, but I wanted to watch the video myself, just to make sure. I turned on the TV and DVD player and inserted the DVD. I pressed the play button and leaned back, feeling my heart break. The picture was perfect, and the room was in the center of the screen. I rewound until I saw a car approaching and slowed down to normal. I clearly saw Colleen Wilson get out of the car and open the door to the room. He went in and closed the door. Fast forward again until another car came into view. I watched as the woman came out and headed for the door. She knocked, and Colin opened the door. He smiled, and the woman came up to him. As soon as she entered the room, she turned to look around the room, and I saw her face. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my pulse was almost off the scale. I stopped the video, went back to the beginning, and watched it in full before stopping. I'll be damned, I said to myself. I should have called Bill Quinn at home immediately. I wanted to check one address, so I took my wife's notebook out of my desk drawer. Of course, the address I needed was there, and that was what I was thinking. I smiled to myself. Now I had all the information I needed to fix everything. I called Bill at home, and he listened to me when I said I needed to talk to him immediately. He invited me to come, but I insisted that we meet somewhere else alone. Just him and me. He was confused, but eventually agreed to meet me at a restaurant near the office. We met there an hour later. Allison and the girls called and said they were going to have lunch at her mom's and would come home later. It gave me the time I needed. I went to a restaurant and met Bill. I wanted to talk to him first before showing him the DVD. I brought along a portable player with a 9-inch screen and headphones so he could watch it there in privacy. He listened to me, and I could see that he was getting angrier and angrier. At first, he refused to believe me and said over and over again that Allison would never have been able to do anything like this. I played back the recording of Ben's meeting with Colin and then outlined everything up to the present and made sure that Ben and Colin were fully involved in the whole thing. Ben was the least guilty, but his cover-up was the beginning of the end for both. When he heard Colleen talking about Allison, his face turned red and he became furious. He personally hired Allison and always treated her with respect, but I reassured him and advised him to watch the DVD before he said anything else. When he was watching the DVD, I noticed how his face fell. The pain was obvious, and I turned away to give him a chance to be alone. He watched all this and finally stopped the record player. He looked at me and I waited until he was ready. As soon as he calmed down, I made my only request. I want them both fired for violating the moral principles clause in their employment contracts. I want them to quit by Monday afternoon. If you agree with this, you can use all the information I have at your discretion. I will never mention it again. Bill looked at me in surprise, but immediately smiled. It was nice to see that smile. I didn't want him to interfere more than necessary. I give you my word. It will be done first thing on Monday, and I will have them escorted out of the building. They're like dead people to me. I can also take further action, but it's better that you don't know what those actions might be. Is it fair enough? Fair enough. With these words, I gave him the bag, which contained all the surveillance data, except for one small cassette, which I kept for myself. I wanted to use it for my own purposes. I was going to surprise my wife. Bill and I talked for about an hour and made some additional decisions, which we will deal with later in the week. We shook hands at parting, and Bill talked to me one more time before I left. You're a good and decent man, Brian. I appreciate what you've done and respect your control in this matter. Things could have turned out very badly if you had been more short-tempered. Accept my gratitude and my respect. I left feeling better than I had in a while. I headed home to see my family. They had no idea about the coming changes. Everything was fine at home that evening, and I was in a very good mood. Allison wanted to know what was going on, but I told her that she would find out about it at work tomorrow. We were very tired the previous night, or several nights, so we went to bed early and just to get some sleep. Allison wanted me to hug her, and I was very happy to do it. We fell asleep in each other's arms, just like last night. It was very busy at work on Monday. At 8:30, Allison called me and asked what was the matter. I pretended to be innocent and asked her to tell me the details. She said Bill asked her to get Ben Kramer and Colin Wilson to his office right in the morning. She said that they were both there now and that they were all screaming. I told her that I was in the dark and asked her to tell me what else had happened. She called 20 minutes later and told me that Bill had asked her to call security at his office immediately. She covered the phone with her hand while talking to someone at her desk and then came back and told me that Bill had asked the guard to escort Ben and Colleen back to their desks. She hurriedly hung up the phone and promised to call back. Nothing was heard from her for the next hour, until she finally called to say that both Ben and Colin had been fired. That Bill wants her to print disciplinary letters for both of them. The reason for the dismissal was a violation of the article on morale. She was very excited. It was the most unusual thing that had happened to her during her time as Bill's secretary. She demanded that we have lunch together and discuss it. I agreed. Over lunch, Allison talked incessantly about what happened that morning. She told me that both of them were taken out of the building and warned never to return. According to her, Bill had been angry and agitated all morning. He even yelled at her once, after which he quickly apologized. In the end, she accosted me and asked me what was the matter. Why should I know anything about this? Bill advised me to ask you when I asked him. He said, ask Brian. He knows all about it, and it was he who opened my eyes to many things. That's what he said, so you have to tell me. Before I tell you what happened, I want you to listen to this recording first. I handed her the tape of Ben and Colin talking about the motel. She started listening with interest, and I saw her face turn pale. She looked at me with her eyes wide open and her mouth in the shape of the letter O in surprise. She listened to the end, and then angrily disconnected the phone. It's not true. He's lying. I've never gone to any motel with him, and I never would have. You can't believe this record. Is that what you gave Bill? Does he believe that too? No, he doesn't believe Colin, and neither do I. I have to explain something to you, and I want you to listen to me to the end. Will you do it? When I said I didn't believe the recording, she relaxed a little, but she was still angry and a little scared. She just nodded and motioned for me to get started. I overheard Ben and Colin talking a little over a week ago. Colin told Ben about you and him at the party. He said he got you drunk and then took you to his car and used you in the back seat. He described in great detail everything he had done and what you had done and told Ben all about it. Ben listened and believed what he heard. You'll be glad to know that he was so impressed that he wanted Colleen to invite him to the next meeting. I was confused and trying to figure out how he could be telling the truth. I couldn't believe it, but I needed to make sure. Allison tried to interrupt me before I could continue, but I just interrupted her. I had to tell the truth quickly before it exploded. I asked Ben to talk to Colin, and Colin said he had a motel on Statler Street for Saturday afternoon, when you were supposed to get your hair done. I was upset at the time, because how could he find out about your appointment with the hairdresser if you didn't tell him? That's when I mentioned Saturday, remember? We had plans for that evening, but he wasn't with. I waved my hand at her and continued. I decided to be absolutely sure that it was really you. So I used one of the company's vans for surveillance and set it up so that I could follow your car and take video of who entered the motel room. I asked the receptionist to clarify the number that was provided to him so that I would know which number to follow, wrote it down and looked through everything on Sunday. Then I called Bill and told him everything. Ben and Colin were fired at my request. Allison listened to me when I told her this story. She was still confused and still couldn't believe that I thought she was with him at the motel. But I wasn't with him. I was doing my hair like I told you. My salon is on Statler Street, but I didn't know about any motel. Don't you believe me? I really know who he was with because she told me. It was. I quickly continued, interrupting her before she could say anything. I had to convince her that I had trusted her all along. It wasn't true, but it was the wisest thing to do. Yes, I said I believe you, and I'll tell you why. I do have a video recording of Colin that day, and a woman did come to him, as he claimed. The woman who visited him in that motel room was Bill's wife, Naomi. I first suspected this after talking to Jerry Scoggins a few days ago. Since Colin claimed that he took you to his car that night, I asked Jerry if you were a little drunk, and he just laughed, telling me that you and his wife drank Coca-Cola and were inseparable that night, and that you even asked her if she would stay she's with her to discourage Colin from asking her to dance. He said it was clear that you didn't like Colleen very much. When I asked him if Colin had ever offered to take you outside for a breath of air, he just laughed and said no way. So you really had doubts about me? Did you set this up to spy on me? I'm not sure I like it. Did you really not trust me? Even after Wednesday evening, Friday and Saturday again? Of course I trusted you, but I couldn't explain Colin's story. Why would he say all this if it wasn't true? Then it occurred to me that he was trying to distract Ben from understanding who he was really with. If Ben had thought it was you, he wouldn't have asked any more questions. I had no idea who it was, so I had to find out the truth. I just wish it wasn't Bill's wife. He was desperate. We talked a little more, and finally I had to come back from lunch. Allison accepted my story about how I was trying to figure out who Colleen was with, and I left her alone. I did have some doubts, and I was ashamed of it, but I didn't regret that I found out the truth. Everything was fine with us now, and I didn't want that to change. Everything went quiet at work that day, but Allison called me again and said that Bill wanted her to come talk to him later in the day. I told her that I really didn't understand what was going on, and I think she believed me. I didn't hear anything else until I got home late at night. We had dinner. The girls were active as usual. They made phone calls, gathered in the toilet, and did other things that only they understood. But in the end, they calmed down and went to bed. We enjoyed the silence for a while before Allison told me what Bill wanted. He advised me to think about how lucky I am to have a man like you as my husband. He talked and talked about trust, respect, and love, about what it all means and what it feels like to lose it all. He eventually told me about Naomi, about what she did, and asked for my advice. What did you tell him? Were you able to help him? I couldn't tell him what to do. I just asked him if he really loved her and if he could forgive her. If he could, I would advise him to talk to her and let her explain herself. But I told him that if he couldn't get over it and forgive her, he should let her go right away. Do not delay, and do not allow feelings to become bitter. He listened to my words, so maybe I helped. I'm sure you did it. Did he mention anything else about me? No, nothing else. Why should there be anything else? Well, yes, there is. Bill offered me the position of Corporate Vice President of Investigations. I would have full control over all investigators in all branches around the world, and I could choose where to work. We could move to California or Florida or any other place where we have a branch with more than 5 investigators. I would still report to Bill, and only to him. That would mean a lot more money and privileges like stocks and other things. Allison screamed and jumped into my lap, wrapping her arms around my neck. She couldn't tear herself away and couldn't stop laughing with joy. When did this happen? Is it because of what you did today? Is this some kind of reward? Who doubts whom now? Bill suggested it to me 6 months ago. I just wasn't ready to think about it until now. I think the thought that I might lose everything I have somehow made my choice more real. Last week I thought I might lose you. It got me thinking. Brian, you could never lose me like this. Just not because of someone else. It will never happen, and you will never think like that again. Can you hear me? Never again. End.